Thank you so much for being in this morning, and I hope that your summer is going well. We're excited about the series that we're in. We're having a lot of fun with it, and trying our best to learn some new habits and practices along the way. Before we jump into today's text, I want to just give you one quick reminder. We have a family in the Dominican Republic that is waiting for a brand new home, and they are counting on us showing up and delivering that home to them in October of this year. And currently, we have a team that is starting to form to be able to make that build happen. We do not have the numbers that we need at this point, and so I'm asking you to consider going with us to the Dominican in October if you have the means and abilities to do that. We need your help. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hot. It's really hot there, okay? So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's hot. You get off the plane and you start to sweat. And then you sweat until you get home. That's just how it is. Beautiful people. My favorite place to go when it comes to the people. I just love the way they all come out and interact. They're great community building people, and you will love it. The experience is incredible. I'm looking for some adventurous types who feel like they're up to the challenge to be able to go and to help us. So just look around the room and see who you think look like the adventurous kind of people that could handle a week in the Dominican and could help us build. And if you don't see anybody, then maybe come to the first service next week and see if you can see somebody in that service that might be able to do that. So all kidding aside, the time is now. If you're interested, please let us know in some way that you're at least interested in finding out more, and would love to have you come with us and help us. It really doesn't take any special skill. It doesn't take any past experience. We build these houses all the time with high school volleyball teams and dentist offices and anybody. So we can do it. It would just be easier if I had you with me, okay? So thank you very much. Looking forward to that. So the series is called A Slow and Sacred Summer, and please buy one of the t-shirts so that we don't have yellow shirts hanging around all winter, okay? Slow and Sacred Summer, and the reason we call it that is because when I was a kid, and maybe when you were a kid, summer seemed to last forever. It seemed to last forever. Even the days were really, really long. I can remember having to go to bed as a child, and the sun was still up. It just felt wrong. Like, why do I got to go to bed? The sun's still up. But the days were incredibly long, nothing to worry about, just peaceful, and almost something sacred about summertime when you're a child. And so what we started thinking about for this summer series is, what if we could live that kind of a life, not summer all the time, but just live in a way where we were able to relax before God, rest in Him, and not feel so urgent and busy and rushed and stressed. In fact, what I'm talking about is really the kind of life that Jesus invites us to live. Jesus says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come to give you abundant life. I would argue, following after Jesus, practicing the ways of Jesus that He modeled and taught for us, is actually the definition of the good life. The good life. That doesn't mean that when we follow Jesus, everything's going to be great. We'll never suffer. We'll have all the things that we ever wanted. It doesn't mean we'll have a boat. It just means, I was bracing for you to laugh at the boat thing and you didn't. Because I was going to say something cool like, look at Noah, that boy had a boat. But you ruined that, so it's okay. What am I doing? Okay. I want to say that I think the scripture teaches, Jesus teaches, that His burden is easy and light when we submit ourselves to Him. And it's not because everything is easy and light, it's because of His presence. So what if we could live that good life? So we've been studying some of the ancient practices and habits of the early church, and These things that were modeled for us by Jesus, showing us the life that Jesus would invite us to live. So we talked about Sabbath rest on the first week, taking a Sabbath. And just by definition, it's mainly picking a day of the week where we said we would pause our normal work routine in order that our soul might be refreshed. So how are you doing? It's been a few weeks. How are you doing with practicing Sabbath? Let's start here with Doug. We'll go around the room. Okay? A little? So carving out a little time to slow down during the week. So yesterday, I'll just give you a practical example. Yesterday was the day that Diane and I chose for our Sabbath day for the week. So we got up. Here's what we did. We got up at 7 a.m. Actually, I got up before that, but we went out at 7 a.m. and we did yard work, which doesn't sound like Sabbath to you, but we've got a long fence that runs across our property. It's got some vines that grow on it, and they needed to be cleaned up and look nice. And so we got out there for a couple of hours, and we just trimmed all that up and then hauled off all the debris. And then I sat down in the chair on the patio, and I just looked at the world that I had created, and I said, it's good. It's good. And I even took pictures of it. Have you ever done that? Have you ever mowed the grass, guys, and then just sit back and look at it? And maybe go get your wife to come out and look at it? There's something restoring to my soul to be able to take a task that's totally different than what I normally do during the week and just enjoy doing it and then sitting back and resting with that work accomplished. So maybe sometimes if you have to work with your mind all week, maybe you rest with your hands on that day. If you work with your hands all week, maybe you do something with your mind. But the idea is to pause. We see it all throughout Scripture. It's woven into the story of God. We're built to stop work and to rest and lean into God and have our souls restored. So we want to practice that. It's really incredibly important for us to live the life that God intended us to live, and a key piece of that is taking a Sabbath. We've also talked about prayer, and some of the things that we learned about prayer have to do with the voice of God. And so we've said that we want to know what the voice of God sounds like. And how do you do that? You read the Word of God. So you read the Word of God so that you know what the voice of God sounds like. And then we want to listen for the voice of God. And then we want to obey the voice of God. So know the voice of God, listen for the voice of God, obey the voice of God. And all of this happens through prayer, but also we talked about silence and solitude as a practice or a habit or a rhythm. Jerry talked about that last week, just carving out some time in your day to shut down all distractions and just be in the presence of God. You just sang about it so well just before we started. I just want to sit here in your presence. I just want to sit here at your feet. That's what silence and solitude is for. And so you begin to hear the voice of God. Today we want to pick up another habit, a practice, and this one is called generosity. The practice or habit of generosity. We look at the life of Paul. Paul in chapter 20 of the book of Acts is getting ready to leave a people that he really cares for, and he has this parting word to say. And I think it's really interesting what he says. I mean, think about what you would say if you were leaving friends and family for an extended time. What would you say? He quotes Jesus in this text, and it's interesting the quote that he chooses. He basically says, I'm going away, but remember the words of Jesus. Jesus said it's more blessed to give than to receive. Isn't that interesting that Paul would say, I might not see you again. Don't forget, it's more blessed to give than receive. That word blessed, when we dig into that a little further, we find that it's well translated deep happiness. Do you like to be deeply happy, boys and girls? Deep happiness is that word blessed or blessed. So I ask the question, is it true? Is it true that generosity is the path to deep happiness and joy? Is generosity the path to the good life that Jesus wants for us to live in him? Well, according to Jesus, the answer is yes. It's more blessed to give than to receive. The interesting thing is that neurological research, the latest in that particular area, and I know that when you think of Dean, you automatically think things like neurological research. You know, you kind of think of me as that kind of guy. However, here's some truths about what the latest research is saying. It's saying yes, too, that generosity is actually a path to deep happiness. Research is showing that when you are generous, the same parts of your brain light up. I don't think they actually light up, but in the studies, that's what happens. If the brain lights up, the same areas where we find satisfaction for food and sex, that same part of the brain lights up when you're generous to someone else. We also find that chemicals are released in the brain during moments of generosity. Dopamine, the feel-good chemical, that's released during the moment of generosity. Another chemical called oxytocin is also released, which is described as a relational, connecting kind of chemical. It helps us to feel connected to other people. So generosity does this. So the research is showing generosity increases then the capacity for relationships and connections. It also decreases depression and stress. So researchers are basically telling us being generous is biologically rewarding to human beings. Isn't that cool? So what if living the good life is not so much about what we keep, but more about how we give it away? So today's teaching is really not about giving what is ours to God, because let's just face it, whenever I get up here and say we're going to talk about generosity, everybody braces for me to ask for your money. What if it's more than that? What if generosity is really about embracing the truth that none of this is actually ours to begin with? Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and its inhabitants belong to the Lord. First Chronicles 29. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the splendor and the majesty, for everything in the heavens and on earth belongs to you. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom, and you are exalted as head over all. Riches and honor come from you, and you are the ruler of everything. Power and might are in your hand, and it is in your hand to make great and to give strength to all. It's all his. The late Tim Keller said this: if you have money, power, and status today, it is due to the century and the place in which you were born, to your talents and capacities and health, none of which you earned. In short, all your resources are, in the end, the gift of God. The gift of God. Generosity. Something else I learned this week that was really interesting about generosity. The word generosity was also kind of the original way it was used had to do in the Latin with a noble family. So when you think generosity, they would think family of noble birth. In other words, in ancient times, it would mean that you belong to a good or noble family, someone who was expected to live honorably and to give freely because you had the good fortune of being being highborn. You know what I mean? So it was interesting to take that idea of generous and then apply it to the teachings of Jesus, thinking about it this way. We are made in the image of a generous God. We are, in fact, born into nobility ourselves. Sons and daughters of the King, whose kingdom is upside down and backwards from all the other kingdoms of our world. The heart of God is incredibly generous. Our heart is to also be generous. So that's why Jesus talks about this particular subject as much or more than he talks about any other subject. I'm just telling you everything I'm thinking. Was there something you wanted to say? I'm happy to take a break and ask. Everybody good? Want to keep going? Matthew chapter 6. This was probably my favorite thing that I learned this week. There's a particular text that every time we talk about money and treasure, this is the text that you often think of. So let's read it. It says this: "Do not store up yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves don't break in and steal." And then it says this phrase, which we all know, right? "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Interesting is what Jesus says following that particular line, because we always stop here and we rarely go further. So Jesus is talking about money and resources and treasure. And listen to what he says next. "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. So if the light within you is darkness, how deep is that darkness?" Why would he say that on the heels of treasure in heaven? Here's the thing that was interesting. I'm doing a lot of word stuff on you today, which I rarely do. But this word healthy, where Jesus says, if your eye is healthy, it was kind of a euphemism in their day for the word, guess what? Generosity. Okay, good job. I feel like a failure. Okay. Healthy was a euphemism for the word what? See, great. Okay, so generosity, and in fact, perhaps what Jesus is saying is if you see life through the lens of generosity, your whole body will be full of light. If you see life through the eyes of greed, then perhaps your life will be dark and isolated and lacking connection. All we can see is what we want. All we can see is what we need. All we can see is what we desire. But when we see life through the lens of generosity, it brightens everything up. And it helps us with connections with other people. When you begin to see your life as a gift from God meant to be given away. So generosity, when we view it like that, is actually a path of freedom and a path from anxiety and isolation. It's in fact a much better way to live. It is the good life. I can remember during seasons where I was struggling with depression. There were particular days when I thought to get off the couch and to make it to the mailbox, that's quite a journey. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And yet, if I could somehow find an opportunity to serve someone else, it was a reprieve from my own depression and anxiety. More than anything else, I think two things: exercise and serving. Exercise and generosity helped to brighten and alleviate anxiety and depression. This is the way that God has wired us to live. So a lot of times when we talk about generosity, we think about money, and maybe it will be money for you. Money is the driver of everything in the world. Maybe money is your expression of generosity, but generosity is much bigger than just money. But the truth is this: whether you have money to be generous with or you don't, all of us have something to give. No matter what season of life you're in, we all have the ability to be a generous people and to put into practice this idea. So for the next couple of minutes, I just want us to look at a chart to kind of help us think about the seasons of life that we're in, because when it comes to resources and finances, we're all in different seasons and sections of life. So take a look at this particular chart. And guys, I apologize for the pink on the right. If it offends you, just try to get through it, okay? You manly men. All right. Let's start with the right-hand side, the far side, where it says financial stability and comfort. Some of us in the room find ourselves in that particular season of life. financially, we're solid, and we're comfortable. Here's the danger. The danger is we can believe a lie, and that lie is, it's all mine. Everything I have is mine. I earned it. I worked for it. Now I have it. Now I can enjoy it. Everything is mine. But what's the truth? The truth is, everything is God's. So how should this inform our daily rhythm, habit, and practice? It should be that we live and give selflessly, sacrificially, and radically. That's what it would look like to be a people of God who find ourselves in a financially stable and comfortable season of life. Others of us in the room are in this section of life where we would say, financially, we're kind of up in the air. It depends on what month it is as to how well we're doing. We're not exactly sure what next month will be like. We know what it's like today, so we're a little uncertain. We have to be careful, or we will be led to believe the lie that money would make us feel more certain. When the truth actually is, only God is certain. Only God is a for sure thing. So how should we practice generosity if we find ourselves in a season of uncertainty? We would live and give thoughtfully. That means paying attention to make sure that we make our ends meet, but we are consistent and we are selfless with our giving. That would mean working a strategy to make sure that we give back to God a portion of what we receive. And we automate those things like we do all our other payments, and we're consistent with the people that cross our path with doing the best we can at being selfless and generous. There's others in the room who we find ourselves in a season of financial hardship. There's also a lie that we can believe that would say, money is the thing that will save me. If I could just get money, I would be okay. And the truth, however, is that only God can save. And so we need to lean into the truth that everything belongs to God and that He is the one that I need. But how do we practice then if we find ourselves in a hard season financially? The practice is really this. You need to be able to share your need with God without shame and with the people of God. That's how God has designed His church to work. That's why we always try to drive you to smaller groups of people so that you are known by other people, so that when financially and other hardships come, we can share with each other and help each other carry the load. We have resources. We have people. There are people in this room that I can partner you with that would be able to show you the best possible way for you to be coached up on financial things, and we can give you training that will help you get out of the difficulty you might find yourself in. There's ways that we can serve each other, but we can't do that unless we share our stories with each other across the spectrum. So generosity will look different in different seasons of life. I want to finish up this particular practice and habit here over just the next couple of minutes. It's interesting that at the time of the writing of the New Testament, generosity was considered a really foolish thing. The main thing in their day was pleasure. And so everybody would do what they felt was most pleasurable for them. And so for you to be radically generous was a really strange idea. I had a guy that came by this week, and I helped him out with a couple of things, and we were standing in the lobby out here, and he saw the saw the pictures from the houses that we built, and his family came from a Spanish-speaking culture, and he looked at the houses, and he was really amazed that we would do that. And it was really interesting. You know what he said? He said, "Why would you do that? Why don't you just let those people fend for themselves?" That was his quote. Why would you do that? Why not just let them figure it out? And so we just said, because when I was in desperate need, Jesus didn't just let me figure it out. And He came to me where I was. He met me in my hardship, and he provided a way back to him. But at the time of the writing of the New Testament, people saw, like this man did, generosity as foolishness. Here's the interesting thing. There's a scholar that writes, his name is Tom Holland, not a Christian, I don't think, but he writes this, that generosity undoubtedly finds its roots in the way of Jesus. In other words, it was Jesus who turned it all around. That was pretty incredible. Because in the first century, they thought it would be a foolish thing. But what the Christians did, those following the way of Jesus, they denied themselves, they took up their cross, they shared their resources, time, and energy, often at great cost to themselves. They shared it with one another, they shared with those in need, believing that none of this was theirs to begin with. And this began to change everything. And most historians will tell you that it was this generosity that fueled the explosion of Christianity in the early days of the church. Again, Tim Keller, the early church was strikingly different from the culture around it in this way. The pagan society was stingy with its money and promiscuous with its body. A pagan gave nobody their money, but practically gave everybody their body. And Christians came along and gave practically nobody their body, and they gave practically everybody their money. Jesus turned it all around. So we close just with this question. What might it look like for us in this time, in this community, if we were a radically generous people, following Jesus, following the way that he modeled for us, living out the truth that we were made in the image of a generous God? I have something called a 3-second rule. I shared it with you a couple weeks ago. How many know what a 5-second rule is? 5-second rule. Okay. When we go to Guatemala and the Dominican, no 5-second rule. We don't do that. Okay? If you drop it, it's gone. Let it go. Okay, let it go. 3-second rule is a little different. Here's the 3-second rule as I learned it from someone else. When it comes to hearing the voice of God and obeying the voice of God, I'm trying to practice giving myself 3 seconds to be obedient to what it is I hear God say to me. So God might say, be generous. I got 3 seconds. He might say, don't do that. He might say, do this. It could be anything that God might say, but I try to give myself 3 seconds to obey. Why? Because if I take any longer than 3 seconds, what I've learned is I will talk myself out of it, I'll debate it for a while, and then the moment the window will be closed. So what if we were a people that whenever God spoke to us and said, be generous to that person, then we responded quickly and obediently? In the same way that it changed the early church, I think it would change us as well.